Welcome back to the Pregnantish Podcast, where we always have real talk about fertility. Today, I'm joined by Ally Johnson, radio personality, voice artist, content creator, and co-host of the Klein Ally Show on KROQ, a popular radio station serving Los Angeles listeners for more than 5 decades. Over the years, KROQ radio host Ally Johnson has built a loyal audience by sharing her life with remarkable honesty and humor, from everyday moments to some of her most personal challenges. Most recently, she's brought listeners along on her family building journey, opening up about fertility treatments, IVF, and the realities of trying to grow her family with her wife, Katie.
I think my advice would be at least try not to suffer in silence. If you can reach out to one person, a therapist, a close friend, a gay aunt in my, whoever, just one person, or a social media account, or anything that you can latch onto to have an outlet, because internalizing it and not talking about it, your mind will go crazy. And mine went crazy. And I'm so thankful for the community that I didn't even know I had by sharing this, because I didn't realize I was a part of the IVF community until I was.
She shared the good, the bad, and the bizarre experience of doing shots for IVF in the belly and the backside, and has invited her audience into a world that many don't know about unless they too are in the thick of fertility treatments. Ally, thank you so much for being on the Pregnantish Podcast. I know this audience understands those shots, but I'm so excited to have you here today, and I appreciate you making the time to share your story.
Thanks for having me. I'm proud to say I've gotten very good at the ass shots over the months.
No doubt.
I feel like now I can't even feel them.
Well, it's like something that I think is terrifying when you've never done one and you just see it. And not that it's fun, don't get me wrong, but I always found the emotional harder than the physical during this process.
Well, I remember when we got the first prescription, I picked up the needles. I was like, what the fuck? I was like, why did they trust me to be doing this at home? Like, I am not equipped to do this. And they're like, here's a YouTube video. I'm like, what
is
You're not even going to give me like a rundown? And then I thought that big ass needle was the one we were supposed to use. Thankfully, there's another smaller needle that made me feel a little bit better. But it was definitely scary at first, but now I feel like my ass is like got a callus or something.
No, listen, I think we've all become experts at all of this, although I had the same reaction with the shots. And when I originally first started doing them, I didn't know you could even administer them yourself. Not that I wanted to, but my husband became the nurse, and that was a whole other chapter of our relationship, which no doubt we'll get into as well with your relationship.
Oh, we don't even have to, because my wife will not do it.
Well, easy. Then we don't have to talk about it.
She was like, I will not be doing that. I was like, all right. So I just had people on the air do it.
So you did it for everyone to see and hear. But I think before we go into, although we've already gotten into the nitty gritty of the fun side, that's obviously not true fun, but the other side of IVF, I would love to just start with who you are outside of fertility treatments. I mean, obviously you host a popular radio show, you do comedy, voiceover work, but anything you want to share with your audience, who are you, Ally Johnson?
Oh, well, I'm just a humble lesbian from San Jose, California. And I grew up doing acting, musical theater. That was all my passion. And my dream was to become a Broadway performer and win a Tony Award. I went to New York and went to acting conservatory at Purchase College up in White Plains, New York. And I was like, I'm going to stay and be a New Yorker. And then I stayed for a couple years afterwards. And I remember I was walking down the street in freezing rain with an umbrella that was breaking. And I think I had dropped my grocery bag in the middle of the street, and it split open, and all the cars were honking and beeping around me. And I was like, I don't know if this is what I imagined my life being. And I ended up I had booked a job that brought me out to the West Coast again. So I decided to relocate to San Francisco, kind of got into the sketch comedy scene there, doing sketch videos and performance and improv and things like that. And then eventually relocated down to Los Angeles and fell into radio. It was not something that I ever really had on my radar. I was doing a kind of a comedy podcast through Playboy Radio, weirdly. And this guy who was hosting the morning Playboy morning show, he had just gotten a job hosting his own morning show back up in San Francisco. And he wanted to co-host with somebody who had never done radio before that he thought was interesting and funny. And so I wanted any kind of steady job in the entertainment industry, and I said, yes, I'll do it, even though I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And I moved back up to San Francisco, and I've been in radio ever since. So now it's been a little over 10 years, and have made my way down to KROQ, back down to LA again. And so it's wild. Yeah, it's kind of weird that all the things that were kind of leading up to radio actually made me very good for this type of work. And then I've always kind of done voiceover on the side. Yep. I've done a bunch of commercials. I did all of Holly Hunter's voice matching for The Incredibles, and did a bunch of video games as her, and did the Walking Dead video game and a bunch of other stuff. I don't do too much voiceover anymore because now I have a kid. Yeah. And I think I kind of value my time a little differently now. So my main focus is on radio, and our listeners have been incredible, and we've been building over the last 5 years this morning show on KROQ, which is a legendary station that's had Adam Carolla and Jimmy Kimmel and Dr. Drew and all these kind of classic people that all had these radio roots in LA. So it's been an exciting journey. And then, of course, my personal life always works its way in, and things get pretty intimate. And I think that's a special connection that we have with our listeners that you don't get with a lot of other shows. So it's something I'm proud of, and it's been hard too.
No doubt, which we're going to get into. I mean, I think, by the way, I think you're the only one probably ever in any room that can say I did Holly Hunter's voice on a video game. That's like you're the only one. You're definitely, but I love it. I think it's such a interesting road you've had, and now you're on this popular radio station amplifying this topic, which is how we found you, of course. Did you meet Katie along the way in San Francisco or LA, or how did that happen?
Yeah, I met her in San Francisco. I was online dating on okcupid.com. It was a website, not an app at the time. And I had dated a little bit when I got there. And then I was like, okay, I think I'm kind of over this online dating thing, but maybe I'll just kind of keep my profile for friendship. Like I don't really know a whole lot of people here. And so I got connected with her, and it said on her profile that she was bisexual. And I was like, oh, here we go. And I had like my own stereotypes around that. I was like, maybe we'll just be friends, whatever. And then we met at a concert, actually for a radio station that I ended up working in the same building as later on. But we never really thought it was going to be anything serious. I realized that I was the first girl that she had ever been on a date with. She had never been with a woman before, and was just kind of figuring all of that out. So there was a lot of unknown there, and we were both in our 20s and young, and just getting drunk in San Francisco and enjoying our time together. And then now we've been together for 16 years almost. Got married in 2018.
Amazing.
So, but yeah, I know. Now we've grown together, which is a good thing.
It is a good thing. What did you?
And she's a therapist.
Oh, I love it. I mean, did she? I always wonder, because when I got married, like the last thing on my mind was having a baby, because I was also, hanging out with my now husband in my 20s. Like, it just wasn't on my radar. But when did you guys start talking about maybe creating a family together and that process? And what did you think it would look like when you started talking about it as two women building a family?
Yeah, we hadn't really talked about it that much. I think there had to have been a conversation about how we wanted kids eventually, but yeah, it wasn't talked about that seriously. Even marriage hadn't been talked about for years. Like, we didn't get married until we were together for 9 years. So it's something that we were just kind of lived our lives until a crossroads came, and then we were like, we should probably get married. And then after like a few years, we were like, we should probably have kids. And so the process I think took a while because it was a little bit daunting and there were so many decisions to make. And we knew already that I was going to carry. My wife has a history with kind of not body dysmorphia, but she's had a history with eating disorders. And there's a lot of body stuff that she has that she has worked through for a number of years. And pregnancy was not something that she was ready for. And I was fine with that. I wanted the experience of being pregnant and having a child. And that's something that I always envisioned for myself. So that part was an easy decision to make. It was choosing a donor. We knew that we wanted to do an anonymous donor. I don't think either of us really wanted to know the person that we got a donation from. So that was also a pretty easy decision to make. But it was deciding which place to go with, finding the right donor. It was a very long process and one that was pretty overwhelming. And all of those sperm banks kind of gouge you and, you know, do you want level 2 information and level 3 information, and do you want to hear their voice and see their silhouette and all this stuff? So that was a frustrating experience, to be honest, but we ended up finding a donor that we really loved, and I'm very thankful for, you know, him donating his sperm and for us you know, choosing him and buying a 5-pack right away. And and then it was like, all right, let's just start. And it was like making that first phone call to our, you know, to Kaiser, being like, well, what do we do? And we just kind of went from there.
Yeah, I know it's such a world that we're really used to at Pregnantish. It doesn't sound strange, but for most people, you know, choosing a donor, buying a 5-pack sounds like, what are you talking about? But how did you both land on the same? It sounds like you're very happy with the donor, but was it like an immediate gut feeling? I'm always so curious how people choose the donor when they're coupled, because they both have to align on what's important.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the donor kind of has qualities of both of us, and that's what we liked about him, because we thought maybe moving forward, we might use Katie's eggs too. So it was like, okay, regardless of which eggs we use, we kind of feel like both of us are represented through background and through personality. And, you know, once we filtered through, like, you know, Katie's background, my background, you know, we wanted them to have the same features as Katie. So once we kind of put that through, you know, it was like you kind of see their Q&As and their genetic report and all that kind of stuff. And it was like we just had to feel it out. But I remember there was one person that we were very interested in, and then we had paid for more information and discovered that there was some health stuff that kind of worried us. And so we were like, I don't know about that. And then we found this donor whose name was Musical Mathlete and donor 16043.
Ooh, that sounds like my husband, but I don't think it is. He's very musical, and he did improv comedy. Oh my goodness. I'll talk to him later. But that's an awesome name. So yeah.
Yeah, I was like, this guy's got it all. And he was one of the only people who wrote detailed answers in his Q&A. It seemed to have a lot of passions. Cool. He has a passion for music, obviously, and smart, and a passion for nutrition and fitness and just a lot of different things. Plays piano, you know, just seemed like a very well-rounded person, and also had donor ID. Yeah. So if our child wants to contact him when they turn 18, they're welcome to. So that was important to us too. And once we found the donor, I feel like things really locked in and it felt less daunting. It was like, okay, we've got that part figured out. Yeah. Now we just have to do the inseminations and stuff. And we started with just doing regular insemination.
And what was that process like? So I think, you know, no one really knows until you try to conceive what's going to happen. But two women know certain things. You know, you need sperm, you know, but what did you know about insemination, and what was your experience with it?
Yeah, I didn't know shit. And when I went in, you know, they are doing it every day. So they're just kind of talking to you like it's everyday stuff. And I'm like, I have no idea what the fuck you're saying. Like most of the time, you need to dumb this down for me. But one thing that I appreciate was my doctor said, you know, let's do a few tests before we do the first insemination because sperm is so expensive. I would hate for you to do some inseminations and then there's a blockage or some kind of an issue and we didn't know beforehand and you've wasted vials,
Oh, that's good.
So
yeah.
my aunt is actually also gay and did insemination and had a donor, and she told me that they tried 3 times and then they did a test and they discovered she had a blockage on her fallopian tube. They removed it and they got pregnant the first time after that. So I'm really glad that everything ended up being okay when I got my tubes checked and everything, but I'm glad that that process was done before that. And we got lucky. We did the first insemination and they basically told us, don't get your hopes up because, it's about a 25% chance. And we got pregnant on the first try, which was incredible. Now, especially now knowing what we just went through, I'm like, what a fucking miracle.
It is really.
Like, I'm just amazed at how pregnancies can just happen.
I
don't
get it.
Now that we've done all this, I'm like, how are crackheads getting pregnant? Like,
I
all
always
the time.
say that, Ally. Like, I don't know if you know my story. I went through 18 treatments over almost 8 years. I cannot believe that sex for some people makes baby in the heterosexual world. How can this pleasurable thing make a baby? And then what I went through with my husband, like, how is that the same way to make, like, we were both making a baby and one is the most pleasurable thing and one is the most painful thing. Like, how is that possible? But
I know, and it comes out normal and not all gangly and deformed. Like, it just works out
wild.
like that. It's incredible. And I compare it to also, like, we've dealt with wildfires in California. I'm like, why when you want to create a fire is it so hard?
Yes.
But when you don't want to, it seems real easy.
Yeah, it's true.
And it kind of seems the same with getting pregnant. If you're not thinking about it, it's a lot easier than if you are thinking about it.
But to your point, when you walk by like a crack addict who is pregnant and you're struggling, it stinks. But that also alleviates, for some of our audience at Pregnantish, that alleviates pressure because we always say, look, if in war-torn countries, people are getting pregnant every day, and people, sadly, who are addicted to drugs getting pregnant every day, you can have all the wheatgrass in the world, and sometimes it's still not going to work, and it's not your fault. Yeah. But you've spent your career being, which I love, like so open, so real. But when did you decide to share the reality of the fertility journey or the infertility journey on, like, for everyone to hear? When was that a conscious decision?
Yeah, I mean, the second time, well, both times it was. I mean, the first time I didn't tell anybody that we were doing insemination or trying to have a child or anything. So once I got through the first trimester, I wanted to make the pregnancy announcement. But on our show, we always try and have fun with it. So we have done this segment before called I've Got a Secret. We usually do it with listeners where a listener has a secret that they've never told another person. We try and guess what it is. So we did I've Got a Secret, and I was like, well, I have one. And everybody guessed what it was. And that's how I revealed the first pregnancy. And it was a real shock to everybody, which was pretty great moment on the air. For round 2, we always are sharing our personal lives. So it wasn't like that hard of a decision, but I did think, when we were first going through it, we had just done insemination again, and we'd used all the rest of our vials. So I was like, oh yeah, we're trying again. I had mentioned it in a personal story a couple of times. And then I was like, oh shit, this isn't happening. How much of this do I really want to share? Because this could be a very long road. And when the words IVF came up, I was honestly really off. I did not want to hear that. Like, I didn't want to hear going to IVF. I had heard so many stories about how expensive it can be and how long it can take. And I was like, oh, do we want another child this badly? It was so easy the first time. Now, this is a very long and expensive road. And then I was like, I don't know if we really are going to do this. So we took some time off and we thought about it for like a year, and we were like, let's just enjoy our lives. And then at the end of last year, we kind of talked and we're like, well, if we're going to do it, we need to just do it now. Like, I'm 41, I'm not getting any younger. So when we started the process again, There was a talk that we had as a show going like, I told them, I was like, I don't know how much I really want to share about this because it could be really disappointing and I don't really want to bum everybody out. And they were like, well, that's okay. And I was like, it's okay. You don't have to share any of it if you don't want to. And then I was kind of like, well, yeah, but it is what's going on in my life. And I always share what's going on in my life. And even though it might be disappointing, I feel like not a lot of people talk about it.
Yeah.
And I also feel like if I'm going to be doing these shots and stuff, maybe there's some fun we can have with it. So that was kind of the decision, how we came at the decision. And then it was like, all right, I got to give myself a shot on the air. It has to be between 6 and 10 a.m. And those are the hours of the show. I don't know what I'm doing. Someone's got to help me. And that's kind of how it all started unfolding on the air. And I knew that it would have a lot of ups and downs, but now looking back, even though it did have that, I couldn't have anticipated how impactful it would be for people and how important it would be for people who have gone through IVF and never talked about it. I got messages from people who said, I did IVF years ago and I never told a soul. And I can't even believe you're sharing this right now. And so the impact didn't hit me until after it was happening already.
I think that's such a common experience for those who share. I always say when you share your story, you get a story. People, this is like a silent epidemic. And you hit on something that I think our audience really relates to, which is the like the IVF chapter. I got pregnant once during IUI and I was like, phew, I didn't need to do IVF. And then once IVF was on the table, whoa, like everything we've heard about it, and not a lot because not everyone's talking about it, but is so daunting. And you guys took that time off. But I think with secondary infertility, which sounds like what you've had, there's also a lot of as much support as you got. Did you get anybody saying, well, at least you have one, or like any of that kind of feedback, which oftentimes comes from a good place, but is kind of ignorant?
Yeah, I mean, I did get some messages that were like, squeeze your boy tight kind of thing. And I didn't really take offense to any of that. It really has made me so grateful. Not that I'm not already grateful that I have an incredible son, but it made me so much more appreciative of his life and how it came to be and how lucky we were that happened the way that it happened. So there was a little tinge of that, but there were also people who shared unsuccessful stories. A woman who did it on her own and she got her eggs retrieved and all of them were bad. And, she did several rounds where she was never able to get any embryos. And then she let that go. And she said, this obviously is not something that I'm meant to do. And it's something that I think she always thinks about. And I also heard from another guy who him and his wife had been going through IVF for years. They're pregnant now, but they had a miscarriage and there was a very long and hard road for them. And he said, when I saw your video of you revealing the results of your IVF round, I started sobbing. Like everything just came out that I had been holding on to for years. And I felt like I had to be strong for my wife during the miscarriage. And all of these things that I've been holding in for years kind of came out when I saw you doing that. So there have been a lot of, even though they weren't all success stories, there were a lot of stories that weren't. It was still that it was still helpful somehow, or that people at least feel like they can reach out and talk about it.
No doubt. I mean, it's so impactful because I always say, like, we hear 1 in 6 struggle to conceive, but that's what's reported. So if 1 in 4,
I think it's way higher.
Way higher. If 1 in 4 experience miscarriage and 1 in 6 struggle to conceive, we have to multiply that number because that's what's reported through a doctor. Like, how many times are people just suffering in silence? When you did that, which is how we found you, the video where you were live on air on your popular radio show with a shot of, what was it, tequila or whiskey or something.
Tequila, yeah. It was right after Cinco de Mayo.
Perfect. So you have a shot of tequila and you have like a progesterone shot or whatever it was. And you were announcing your pregnancy test results from your first IVF round, which is a big
Correct.
deal. And I think anyone watching the clip of you emotionally processing that result on air felt it so deeply. But what was going through your head during that time? Like, how did it feel to be so exposed, even though you are, you've made your living being so open, but how are you dealing in that moment?
In that moment, I'm not thinking anything. Yeah, I was just feeling and also breathing
Mm-hmm.
and saying it's okay to feel whatever I'm feeling. We need to let this moment be,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. There's no expectation here. Because when things are happening live on the air, you really need to breathe into them and allow them to be raw
Mm-hmm.
and not think, oh, I shouldn't be crying right now, or oh, what is everyone, oh, this is too sad.
Mm-hmm.
You can't think about any
Mm-hmm.
of that stuff. But the night before, because we had found out the night before, and I, of course, you're on so much
Oh,
medication
yeah.
too. You're like crazy. And I was devastated. I was also felt kind of the day or day before I had a bad feeling. Like I just had a feeling that it wasn't going to be positive. And then when it wasn't, I couldn't even function. Like I was so depressed
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't take care of my kid. I had to just be alone.
Mm-hmm.
And then my wife was like, you should just don't go to work tomorrow. Like you're very upset and you're allowed to be upset and no one would be upset if you just took a
Mm-hmm.
day, to be with yourself and to be with us. And there was like a little gardening day that was happening at my kid's school. And she was like, why don't you come with us to the gardening day? Like we can just have a nice family day. And I was thinking like maybe I should because I can't imagine going on the air tomorrow and sharing this. It's going to be so fucking
Yeah.
hard. And then I was talking to my dad on the phone and he had mentioned that too. Like, why don't you take the day off? And I was like, I just feel like everyone else has also been on this journey with me about it. And if I don't show up, it's going to be obvious that it's negative and it's going to be really hard. And also, I feel like I need to do
Mm-hmm.
it. And I know that my wife didn't really understand why at the time, and she had even said, do you feel like you get more support at work than you do at home?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you feel, well, why do you feel like this is what you need to do? And I'm like, well, they're my family
Yeah.
too. I know it's not that they're more supportive. It's just that I feel like this is also a community that I need to speak to. And if it's going to happen, it needs to happen tomorrow. It
Mm-hmm.
needs to happen because everyone knows that the results are
Right.
in. So it was really hard the morning of because I didn't want it to be obvious to anyone that I was really
Yeah.
sad and that it was really hard for me to be there. So I'm just like getting my news stuff ready and, being on the air and, just pretending like it's any other day. And then it came time to share. And once I took the shot and everyone reacted, that's when I really started to feel the impact of the sadness in that moment. But it's different. It's different than experiencing it at home. You're experiencing it with a bunch of people in this live moment and everyone is
Mm-hmm.
reacting in the moment and calling and texting and um yeah, there's nothing like it.
Well, I was
So
gonna say,
it
like,
feels very raw,
that
but
that that
it feels good in a
that's
way.
right. Like, very few people, not everyone, but most people are navigating this silently. And the fact that you had people in that room hugging you, crying with you, supporting you. And by the way, you did something so powerful in that, for people who don't know what infertility looks like, which is actually our hashtag at Pregnantish that we launched about 6 years ago. But they were as invested, some of your audience, as maybe not as you and your wife were, but like they were super invested in this working, and you brought them along on what the reality of this process is, which is not always one and done, not always just do IVF. Yeah, just like it doesn't always work the first time or at all, to your point before.
Right.
And so I think you did a service, not just to your to your audience, but like you educated people through that about what this process really is. I mean, what do you wish you were told before you started IVF or any fertility treatment? Is there information you want others to know that would have been nice for you to know?
That's a good question. I think one thing I would have liked to know from my doctors and from people that I know that have done IVF is that the medication will make you feel pregnant.
Yeah.
Because that was something that nobody told me. So and this was during IUI and especially during IVF, I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I'm having this cramping. Oh my God, my boobs are sore. Oh my God, am I smelling something different or my taste is different? These are all things that I felt when I was pregnant. So I must be pregnant. And I had convinced myself and was like, well, and this part was before IVF, but during one of the IUIs, I remember thinking, we'll just do a urine test at home. Like,
Yeah.
I don't even need to do the blood. Like, we'll just do this now, get it out of the way. We'll do a celebration video. We like did the video and it was negative, and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I was convinced. And so that was something that I really wish they had spelled out.
Yes.
Was to let us know that these symptoms are going to happen and they might not indicate pregnancy at all.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I mean, part of why we're called Pregnantish is that, first of all, I think if you have an embryo transferred in your body and you have all the hormones running through and you're feeling pregnant, you are pregnantish. But it's regardless, that's a really good point. I mean, just to tell people that you could drive yourself crazy with every symptom. And when you've put down so much time and money and hope into the package of your first IVF, it's really hard to believe that it doesn't work. I mean, it's really hard to see that.
Oh my God. I thought to myself, I am in the end zone.
Yeah.
There's nobody defending
Yeah.
me. There is a quarterback handing me the ball in the end
Yeah.
zone, going, all you have to do is just and so I did blame myself. That's the other thing that I want other people to know, and that I think everyone, it's easy, you could tell someone, but I think it's a thing you have to work out for yourself, but to not blame yourself and to not say, well, what's wrong with my womb? What's wrong with my egg? What's wrong with the sperm? What's wrong? That's not happening, because this is happening in other people so easily. But I do think that we're reaching a time where infertility is growing more and more common.
And definitely
and
more
I think
talked
that's also
about.
why it's important to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, it's changed a lot in the 10 years we've been live. I just, it's amazing to watch. And yet, all over the world, we do a global project called the World Fertility Project. We hear people in Africa and India and Asia saying it's still whispered. And we're looking to you guys because you're talking about it so openly. But even here, sometimes it feels whispered. So what you're doing is so incredible. I guess for the listeners who are, and by the way, I always say, and I'm sure you agree, Ally, you're a public person. I used to host TV. Like we're open and on a mic. Not everyone has to have that moment. And that's totally okay. I know you agree with that. But for those listening right now who don't want to share, but who are listening so closely and so deeply and so appreciative of your voice and your story and your openness, like what do you have? I mean, advice is a killer in this community, but I think when you know this pain point, it's sometimes helpful to hear from people who've been through the thick of it. Do you have any words for people who are listening, who are losing hope or just feeling like they can't, they can't see anything good ahead and they're just overwhelmed? Do you have any advice?
God, that's so hard, because I feel like it's all so recent for me too. And, I had been reached out to by another woman who, had like a crazy amount of
Mm.
miscarriages. And she explained her story to me, and I was just like, I don't know how you found the strength to get through that.
Yeah.
That's incredible to me. And if you don't want to share any of it, that's absolutely okay. I think my advice would be at least try not to suffer in
Yeah.
silence. If you can reach out to one person, a therapist, a close friend, a gay aunt in my,
Yes, totally.
whoever, just
Yeah.
one person,
Yeah.
or a social media account, or anything that you can latch onto to have an outlet, because internalizing it and not talking about it, um, your mind will go crazy, and mine went crazy. And I'm so, so thankful for the community that I didn't even know I had by sharing this, because I didn't realize I was a part of the IVF community until I was. Until you reached out and other people
Yeah.
reached out. I'm like, oh, wow, like I'm a part of a community, and I can lean on that community, and I can allow them to lift me
Yeah.
up, because there are so many stories out there, and hearing them, I think, really does help you get through it. At least it did for me. So even if you don't want to share it publicly and you want to share it privately, I think it's still so beneficial, um, than just keeping it all in.
Yeah, I totally agree. It can be so therapeutic to just have someone listen in the right way. And we all know the people who don't listen in the right way, and just create
Oh, yeah.
healthy boundaries with those people. They don't need to know if you don't feel safe with them. But you recently shared IVF Transfer 2. It's your last post in your grid.
Yeah.
Where are you now in the process? Are you in a 2-week wait, or what's?
Well, I did the transfer at the end of May, and so the 2-week wait is over, and I came back on the air, and I had a pill that was a prenatal vitamin, and I had a pill that was a magic mushroom pill.
I love it.
Because because of there's another reason why it was a magic mushroom pill, but I won't get into that. And so on the air, I took the prenatal vitamin. So revealing that I did have a positive pregnancy test, and it was still
Yeah.
early. It was like at 7 days post transfer. So I just actually did another test, and my HCG levels are rising, and
Uh,
everything looks good so
I'm
far. So
so happy.
it's thank you. I feel good, and I did feel like there was something different this time, and it just feels like validating to be like, I feel like there's something different, and then there was, rather than being like, well, fuck again. But this time I did acupuncture. I did a lot of different things. I changed my diet. I did a sound bath. There's a lot of things that I did to lower my internal
Hmm.
like my stress,
Hmm.
and calm my central nervous system. So that's another piece of advice, is even if it still doesn't result in a baby, doing things to help with stress, um, were just a game changer,
Mm.
for the process, just to calm yourself through it, because it's so easy to rile yourself up. And, it's weird now, because everybody on the air knows that
Yeah.
I'm pregnant, but it's still so
Yeah.
early. So there's something very vulnerable and scary about that,
Yeah.
because usually you don't tell people until you're out of your first trimester,
Right.
and miscarriage is still a real, possibility. And so that feels scary.
No doubt.
But I'm at least happy to share some good news, and the response has been incredible. People are like, I have this what is it, a parasocial relationship, where people feel like they're connected to you even though
Yes.
you've never met them.
Yeah.
So it's been pretty incredible to see how many people are, it's like someone, it's like their sister saying that
I
they're
love it.
pregnant.
Oh, that's incredible. Well, we're rooting you on. We're holding all the hope that everything is just smooth from here on out. And thank you so much for sharing your story and your vulnerability. I mean, I think there's so much power in vulnerability and vulnerably sharing the truth of what happens behind the scenes. in your case, in front of on the mic, but still behind the scenes, the struggle with your wife and holding your son close and all of that. It's been beautiful to have you on. Thank you so much for being on the Pregnantish Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the work that you do. It's incredible that you've been doing this as long as you have, and hearing everybody's stories. I've listened back to some episodes, and it's been really nice for me to kind of delve deeper into the community and to hear other people's stories, that I haven't directly interacted with. So it's been great, and I'm happy that you've got a little one too, and I'm thankful that you're willing to share your journey.
Yeah, thank you. And they grow fast, as you know. But
Yeah.
Where can people find you? I mean, we'll put it in the show notes, but to follow you and find you.
Yeah, the morning show is called Klein Ally Show, Klein, Ally, Ally. So if you want to ever listen to an episode or listen live or find us on socials, it's just Klein Ally Show. And then I'm Ally Johnson, so you can find me at Your Ally Johnson. And I'm wherever you're listening to podcasts or listening to the radio. You can find me.
Love it. Thank you. And thank you for listening to another inspiring episode of Pregnantish, where we cover the extraordinary lengths extraordinary people go to create their families. Until next time.